Today's guest is a survivor of both childhood sexual abuse and sexual abuse as an adult at the hands of a mental health professional. She's a passionate Christ follower and expert on the healing God provides. Her devotions have been published in The Secret Place, her memoir, Preyed Upon, won the Inspired Christian Writers Great Opening Contest for Nonfiction. Welcome to the show, Amy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you. I'm
Hi.
so excited to be in Germany.
Yes, it's so great to have you in Germany also virtually. I'm so
Yeah.
I'm so delighted and grateful that you made this time out to share your story with me, to share with the world what you've gone through, what you've experienced, and also impact them in one way or the other so that they could believe that they are not alone in whatever situation they are in. That's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. I really admire your strength, your courage, like I said before we start recording, to go through all of this and to come out better, to come out stronger and be able to even have the courage to share with the world without, overcoming, as in, with just without, holding it back to yourself or without being shameful about what you've gone through, basically. Thank you so much for that. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'll be so, glad and grateful if you would love to share your story of how you went from being a victim of two sexual abuses to becoming a thriving child of God.
Yes, I had a lot of sexual abuse as a child, actually, starting at age 3, and then it just kept repeating. Like age 12, it was a priest, and then a swim coach, then a doctor. Anyway, on and on. It was like I had a target on my back, and I think it was a result of the low self-esteem that comes from when you're taken advantage of at a young age. So here I was, a grown adult. I think I was around 40, 41, and it was 2013. And I decided that I would try counseling again. I had become a strong Christian. And so when this therapist was recommended to me, I was really excited because I found out he was an elder at the new church I was attending. And he was a psychiatrist, so he was also a medical doctor, and he came highly recommended. So I started seeing him, and really I was just wanting to work on the depression that I felt like had followed me around my entire life, and stemming from past abuse and from low self-esteem and issues, surrounding parenting and my marriage and things like that. So I started seeing him, and, he was kind of a quirky, goofy, grandfatherly type figure. And so I felt very, safe, and he always opened up our sessions in prayer. And so I thought that was really cool. And I didn't know a lot about the Bible, and he was like, not a scholar, but he knew a lot more than me. So I was really excited to have this like Christian, leader guiding me along this process. And he took a very different approach to therapy and depression. He kept it more in the spiritual realm, meaning like he told me that I needed to look for different, it's hard to explain, but different traumas in my life. We needed to go back to those places, go back to that age, and pray away any evil that he said might be there. In other words, my depression, he said, was a result of having evil spirits in me. And I know that's very weird, and I also thought it was a little odd, but growing up, I heard a lot about that. I heard a lot about evil spirits, and being a new Christian and not knowing a lot about the Bible, I was open to it. And I was kind of like, I've tried everything else and nothing else has worked. I cannot seem to ever shake this depression, so let's give it a shot. And so we started, and at first it seemed like the therapy was helping me. I think just having somewhere to go each week and have someone, listen to me and support me and want to help me was what benefited me at first. I didn't realize that I was actually just a pawn in his game. I didn't realize that I was being groomed. Are you familiar with that term, grooming?
Yes. Like,
I knew that applied. I thought that applied to children, but I never thought of an adult being groomed. And with adults, the grooming process looks a little different. He, of course, was doing all the things that we hear about, like making me feel special and making me feel cared about, but then also really playing on my empathy by sharing a lot about his personal life, so that I became kind of attached to him and almost felt a little responsible for him.
Yeah.
So that, down the road, when he did something that maybe was a little shocking to me, I felt, kind of too sorry for him to say anything.
Yes.
Or, and anyway, so it was about 6 or 7 months into therapy when he offered to rub my shoulders or my feet for a Christmas present. Yeah. And I freaked out. I mean, I just froze, and I wish that I could announce that I said no, but it's like, it's so weird to me how childhood abuse sets us up to not be able to say no to, especially to somebody in a position of authority and somebody who's a Christian leader and somebody who's a doctor. So I felt like, I had to pick one, and I think I picked shoulders, and then that was uncomfortable. So I switched to feet, and I just forced myself to sit through it. And then, as sexual abuse victims often do, we rationalize it. We make excuses for it. We minimize it. I figured, Amy, you're just too sensitive. It's not a big deal. I mean, he's rubbing your feet like he's like a father figure. You know him really well now. You guys are close. He's more like, a father-daughter than a therapist-client, and it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but you kind of enjoy that you're a little bit special, and that's something he would never do with a regular client,
Yes.
Because it's when you start therapy and you're so vulnerable and so open that, you just kind of hope that they at least like you. You kind of hope your therapist isn't just seeing it as a job. So any little sign they give you that shows, oh, you're more than just a client, feels really good. And the process continued that way when, he would back off when he thought he startled me, and then he'd add something else, and he'd wait till I adjusted to it. And every time there was something like that was shocking, I thought that my reaction was about something wrong with me. Like, you are way too sensitive. Like, what is actually the problem? Like, or, he wouldn't be offering this if it was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, he's clearly offering it for therapeutic reasons. And the fact that you're so uncomfortable with having your feet touched means you need to work through that, or you know what I mean?
I understand.
Or whatever the thing was that he would present with me. And, another way, these predators are master manipulators, and they would make every move that they were making, they would kind of make it feel like maybe it was our idea. Like I mentioned, imagining myself dancing with Jesus, like a father-daughter wedding dance, and how that was therapeutic for me. Well, then he offered to dance with me, and I panicked, but I thought, Amy, he's offering it because you brought up that idea.
Dance, yes.
Yeah. And so then I would think, just do it. This is so awkward. And so fast forward, I was seeing him for about a year and a month when I realized I'm in deep trouble. At first, I thought he was just luring me into an emotional affair, which I wanted nothing to do with. I mean, he was like a father, so that was creepy. I had no idea that we were working towards sexual abuse. That wasn't even on my radar. And so I finally got up the courage to tell a close friend. She was the pastor's wife at the same church, and she knew this doctor well. She'd recommended him to me in the past. And I told her how he had assaulted me, and she took his side. And I was devastated because I had told her lots of things leading up to that too, just little red flags I'd noticed that I wasn't sure about. And so then I retreated, inward. And then I felt like I had nobody, because I felt like, I wanted to tell my husband, but I felt like if I tell him what happened to me, then he's going to question, well, why was he sitting next to you? Like, I felt like I was telling on myself, like I was the loser that, allowed A, B, and C to happen. And therefore he took advantage of me. Do you know what I mean?
I understand. Yes, I do.
If I hadn't been so needy, if I hadn't have wanted a dad, if I hadn't have liked the comfort of him sitting next to me, then he wouldn't have taken advantage of me. So it was very scary to tell. And so when I reached out to my friend and she didn't believe me, I thought nobody's going to believe me because, I'm an adult. And so I stayed longer. It got worse. And I finally was able to get out. And I went back to my same friend, but then I told her husband, the pastor, and they were able to help me leave.
That's awesome. That's great. Like from what you share right now, I have this feeling that at that moment or at that point in your story, you had that feeling that someone was trying to show you love and trying to, be there for you at your vulnerable state, but it felt so awkward. But for you, it was going to be wrong not to accept that love that he was trying to reach out to you with. But that was not actually love. That was, him trying to groom you, like you said, towards something. Yeah.
And he used, Jesus and God. He said he was trying to love me for Jesus. Well, he wasn't inappropriate with me at that time. So I thought that God was blessing me and allowing me to have a safe, nurturing father figure, something that I hadn't known before.
Yeah.
And I felt like, so he sits next to me. So he gives me longer sessions. So he gives me a hug when I leave. I mean, there wasn't anything that I didn't know there was anything inappropriate happening. And, so he used that and he played on my vulnerability of kind of being a naive new Christian and was excited, that God was working in my life. And I thought I was thanking God for this, like it was a blessing that he was giving me.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. Yes. And that's why you wrote in your book that, at that point in your story, you could not see a pattern emerging, like, it's really occurring again, like it happened in the past. Yeah. So for people out there who are going through something similar, how would you advise them to avoid such a situation? What are the things to look out for in order to break free from therapist abuse?
Yeah. And it's hard because some things are gray areas. Like, it's okay for your therapist to care about you. It's okay for them to maybe, give you more time during your session for one particular week because you're having a hard week, but there's certain things they wouldn't do. And those things would be, like I had 2-hour sessions eventually that even later morphed into 3 hours. That is highly unethical. An ethical therapist wouldn't do that. They wouldn't pick you out and make you feel more special than all their other clients. I mean, it's okay if they say a kind word to you and they're trying to build a relationship with you, but I had special candy that was just for me. I had a special blanket that was just for me. They wouldn't do those things. I mean, they would show care and concern to you, but not, elevate you to a level of daughter or, or their favorite client. They wouldn't have contact with you outside of sessions. My therapist at first didn't, but then towards the very end, he started calling me from his cell phone. That should not ever happen unless there's like a crisis or an emergency or something that you reach out to your therapist and they call you back or something. Another thing, if you notice that you're starting to isolate, that because a predator will try to isolate you in subtle ways, like maybe putting down your spouse or steering you clear of certain friends because they want to get you in a smaller and smaller bubble so they can control you.
Yeah.
And my world started to get smaller and I started to only trust my world. I had outside friendships and I stopped communicating with them because I thought, well, they just wouldn't understand. They wouldn't understand the weird therapy and they just wouldn't get it. And they would maybe think something was wrong, but they wouldn't understand because there's nothing wrong. He's not doing anything wrong. So, you start to have those gut feelings that maybe something isn't right. So you just start not telling as many people things like, I didn't even want to tell people at first that my sessions were 2 hours because I was embarrassed, and so when you start keeping more secrets, that's a red flag. When your world gets smaller, it's a red flag. Because there at the end, I trusted just the therapist because my world had gotten so small. I had stopped sharing with other people what was going on. There should not be physical contact. Some therapists will give a hug at the end. some will shake hands and some will not do anything, but certainly no other kind of physical touch. They should not be sitting next to you. They should not be sitting close to you. They shouldn't be, offering to cover you up with a blanket or even offering you a tissue. You can get that out of the tissue box yourself. Like, they should be training you to become more independent so you can leave therapy, not treating you like a child and coddling you and nurturing you so that you stay there forever. And so that you stay thinking they shouldn't be your savior. And it's okay in therapy, you get attached to your therapist. And I don't know if you've ever been in therapy, but it's okay that we feel like maybe they are our savior. They're going to heal us and save us, and they're an angel and they're sent from God or whatever. Just, they're so wonderful. That's fine. That's natural to happen in therapy, but they should be trained to not allow you to stay there. If that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. Yes. They should, like you said, I'll use the word again, groom you to grow out of therapy, or if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible.
They shouldn't be fostering dependence. They shouldn't be making you feel more childlike and feel more attached to them. They should be helping you work through those issues so that then you can, leave therapy and have healthy relationships. Yes. I hear of a lot of therapist abuse from other victims that isn't sexual like mine, but the therapist crosses all those boundaries, loves on them like they're a child, calls them, sweet, endearing names, and rubs their hair and holds their hand and lets them email them and call them and text them outside of sessions. And the poor patient becomes so incredibly attached and dependent. And then the therapist takes it all away or leaves or anything, and then they're just crushed and they don't know how to function. That is extremely, like fostering dependence. That is also extremely cruel to do to another human.
Yes. So, and I'm so glad that you were able to break free from that abuse, like break free from that kind of therapist. So how is it like for you right now? Having experienced several sexual abuse, even from the hands of, someone that's supposed to have been trusted. How is it journey like for you? Are you still able to, visit other therapists? Are you able to trust other people? Are you able to feel free to speak with your friends and family that thought you were lying when you shared with them in the past?
Yeah. A lot of friendships fell away just because they didn't know how to maybe talk to me about it in a way that they didn't understand it. They didn't understand that it wasn't an affair, that it wasn't something I wanted. And so it's been hard, and it was very hard on my husband and my marriage at first, but he quickly came around and knew that would never be something I would do, that wasn't something that I was looking for, a father figure. Yes, but I was not looking for anything else. And so, we're close now and I can talk to him freely about it. I did have to seek out another therapist after this because the trauma was just so huge that friends and family don't know what to do with that. And it was helpful. And that was years ago. And then I have found one more recently that's helped me a lot. So it was really just a decision that I had to trust again, that I wanted to trust again, because I didn't want to stay alone and isolated, because I've lived a lot of my life that way, not trusting and alone and trying to handle everything on my own. And that didn't work out so well. So I don't want to go back to that. So I have chosen to trust therapists. Am I more leery now? Yes, but that's okay. And I am struggling mostly to trust church and pastors and Christians, which I know kind of sounds silly, and I'm not really sure why. I guess I'm most shaken. Like, I know, like this abuser was a sociopath. And so I was able to move on from that because I don't care about him at all. He's nothing to me. He's just this evil predator that I encountered. But I felt so hurt by the church, and those were people I was close to and friends with. And it's harder for me to heal, I guess, in that area.
Well, how do you separate, all of these people and the church from God himself? Like, your book, you wrote love letters from God to yourself, basically. And, at that point in your life, you thought that his professions of love does not apply to you. But how are you able to like go from that point to this point where you believe that yes, you're a child of God and He loves you so much for who you are, for what you've experienced?
Yeah, that was huge, because God used this abuse to kind of heal me from all the past abuse.
Mm.
It was a slow process. I started out just needing to know I wasn't alone, because I thought I was the only one in the universe that had ever been manipulated as an adult, especially sexually abused as an adult. I didn't even know that was a thing. So I found other women that were professional, educated, great women that had also been manipulated as adults by therapists or clergy. And just knowing I wasn't alone was part of it. Then I need to, I'm so sorry.
No problem. No problem. It's cool.
After that, I really just needed to process what happened, and I just needed time and to piece it all together, that I had been groomed. Taking action was part of healing and getting my self-esteem back. So going to the medical board, and then I filed a civil suit that gave some of my strength back. But the real, true, deep healing came with kind of looking at all those hateful things I was believing about myself that I didn't even know I was believing about myself. But I saw myself believing them while I was being abused and while I was making excuses for this. I'm like, why am I making excuses for this man? Like, why do I keep going back?
Yeah.
Like, what am I thinking that's allowing me to do that? And so really uncovering, I call them rules, but kind of uncovering those negative tapes that we don't always realize we're even playing in our head was part of it. And then, as you said, I wrote love letters to myself from God in poetry. Just, kind of throwing everything at him about what I felt about myself. I mean, look what I did. Look what a bad person I am. Look what a loser I am. Look, and letting him speak back to me the way that I knew that he would, because the Bible tells us how he feels about us. So it's, and I know God doesn't lie. And so I know that's truth. So I just kept speaking that truth back to myself over and over and over. And eventually I started to feel a shift, and that self-hatred started to lessen.
Yeah.
I also had to work on forgiveness. I had to forgive my abuser, because initially that was taking all of my energy, and I didn't want him to take any more energy from me. And that was a process in itself. And I had to forgive, the church and those around me that had hurt me. And I did that because I wanted all of my healing. I wanted all of my own energy back. Yeah. I wanted everything. I wanted it just to be God and I. And so I couldn't have that anger, and bitterness and even self-hatred coming in between us. So it was really that writing to myself. And you don't have to write, you can even imagine what God would say back.
Yes.
But just bombarding myself with those kind of scriptures about how God really feels about us was what eventually was able to restore, really, restore me back to the person that he made and that I was, and that person I don't think I ever even knew in my whole life until now.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Awesome. Yeah, that's so awesome. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's interested, I'm going to place the link to your website in the show notes of this episode. On your website, you have the poetry and you have the photography that you also use. Like, you have a lot of pictures with Bible scriptures that talk about love, conversation with the Father, and it really helps, to heal and to overcome any situation or circumstances in life, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, that was another way I healed, is that I started to see God in nature, where nature wasn't really that exciting to me before. But when my relationship with God became personal, then I started to see God in nature. And I'm a photographer, hobbyist. And so I just started taking my camera and going out in nature is another way that I spend time with God. And so yeah, that's what you're referring to with I like to put scriptures with them.
Yes, it's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with the world. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And also, your book is a wonderful work of art. I love the fact that you are, I won't say, let's say vulnerable. I don't know if vulnerable is the right word, but you are open. You explain the story and you talked about your experience in the book. And I was reading a little bit of the book, and you wrote about people that experience, or people that were victims or are victims of sexual abuse always feel worthless. They always feel like there's something wrong with them. They always feel damaged or unqualified for love. So from your experience, how would you advise these people that are still, feeling so worthless and so unqualified for love? How can they start feeling worthy, loved, and enough, basically?
Yeah, I think, like we already talked about the scriptures and reading that and who God says they are. But I really think God uses community and other people to heal us and build us up. So I don't really think that we can successfully do life alone. So, even though it's hard to trust, and especially we already feel like something's wrong with us, I think finding some sort of community, like I found a lot of healing with Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step group, a Christian 12-step group. And you don't have to have an addiction, to attend that, but somewhere where you can be. And, for some people, they find that in church, and for some people, church is much too scary and they've been hurt, but find a support group so that people can kind of lift you up and walk with you through this time, because it's not like a quick, process. And those people are out there, and, I have some in my world, and I'm always looking, I feel like as we grow, God puts different people in our lives.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm right now kind of looking for that new tribe, not that I'm losing old members, but I mean, looking for what I need now to help me grow. And so, and really just recognizing what you're telling yourself, because I think a lot of times we have no idea what we're thinking. We just know we keep returning to abusive people. We keep having friends that treat us poorly, or we keep finding relationships where we are treated. And it's like, talking with a therapist or someone you trust about what's going on, because we are telling ourselves that's what we deserve. And we're seeing it in our behavior. That's kind of what happened to me, is I saw my behavior and I'm like, how am I allowing this? And so I think doing that kind of soul searching really helps, and trying to get to those, because those are the underlying messages. Those are the things that are key to getting rid of that feeling of unworthiness. And, it's tough, because for me, faith was such a big part of that. For me, God was the, sole source of really healing that, getting down to the root of who I am.
Yes.
But it's okay if you have issues with God and your faith is shaken, just start slow, and just give him a chance. Just tell him, you can tell God, I know now you can tell God whatever you're thinking. And I don't even think this is going to work, because I told God, I'll say that I forgive my abuser, but I don't. And you're going to know it, and you're going to know I'm lying. So what's the point? You just have to start really brutally honest with God, because and I'm such an honest person. I can't pray something I don't mean. And so I said, okay, I want it. So just start with saying, how do I start? What do you want me to do? What can I do? I don't believe that I'm deserving of love. I read your words, but they don't mean anything to me. You can talk to God that way, and just pray, to please penetrate that self-hatred barrier and let me really feel that. And he will do that. And he'll meet you in ways that are unique to you or special to you. Like for me, it was, showing me hearts in nature, and I photograph them and I see them everywhere. And he'll do that for you in a way that is meaningful to you if you let him.
Yes, that's true. I can totally relate with that also. Like, there are times in life where maybe I'm going through something that I don't feel comfortable to talk about with any other person. I just talk about it with God, and just pour out my frustration and my heart to him, basically. And sometimes you just, from maybe taking a walk on the street or in nature, or just from tiny whispers, you get that comforting word, that answer. And like you said, building a community, having that support system, basically, even if you don't trust in God, having a support system, like having faith in God, helps us to
right, because
Yes.
use people. And if you're at home by yourself, he can't use people.
Exactly.
They probably won't knock on your door, which is, I'm an introvert, so I wish people would just come knock on my door. But I have to put myself out there
Yeah.
and allow God to bless me in different ways.
Yes. But do you believe that the community that we are supposed to build are supposed to be people who have, gone through similar things like we have, so that they could relate with our stories? Or could it just be people that are just, random people, or, people that we could trust, basically?
That's a good point. And I hope that people who have had sexual abuse hear this, because I am convinced that pain is pain, and that betrayal is betrayal, and that all of us as humans can relate to those emotions.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the source of it. So if you feel like, oh, it's sexual abuse, and sexual is it's uncomfortable and feels icky and it's embarrassing. But there's so many people that can relate to the emotions that you're feeling, that have had different issues. And I was able to go to this really cool training years ago, and we were all supposed to think of like the worst negative tape that we play in our head. And so we all did, and we were from ages 18 to 60s, and men and women, all different backgrounds from all over. And they told us to pick the worst one, and they gave us the microphone, and it went around the room. And I think there's probably 50 of us. I swear to you, we almost all said the exact same thing. Wow. And it was so shocking and eye-opening to me that we are all walking around essentially feeling the same way. It's just a different version. Different life events have caused it, but it was all something like, something is wrong with me, or I'm defective. So, the more we open up with other people, and the more vulnerable we are, the more risk we take, the more we realize how many similarities that we all have, and that we're really not that different, and that we're really not that weird. And so, to answer your question, no, I don't think you have to. I mean, in certain areas of healing, like you would want a therapist that understands maybe the nature of sexual abuse, and it is good. It was comforting to me to find other adults that have been through this. Yeah. Because even it is especially shameful to be manipulated or duped in any way as an adult. And knowing you're not alone in that was huge. But in general, as far as support goes, I think that we all can relate to each other more than we realize. Does that answer the question? Yeah, it does. It does. Yes, yes. I was asking that question because, sometimes I have this fear that you might be talking with someone who has not experienced such, for example, sexual abuse, and the person will be like, oh, you shouldn't have gone to the therapist. You should have stayed out of, that place, for example, and why you're in your right senses, or I think sometimes I just have the fear that people underestimate what we've gone through, or just wash off what we've gone through, and it's ought more than being open to them, or being vulnerable to them too. But I will add, because I was cringing when you were saying that, because early on, when your emotions are really raw, and it was very devastating for me to have people say the wrong thing back to me. I needed people in the beginning who totally got it. Yeah. Because otherwise I was just continually hurt and damaged even more by those people, like you're saying, that are like, well, I had an attorney, a female attorney, say, well, why did you go back? Yeah. I was just devastated, and I had friends that said, well, I don't remember, but just lots of things that were minimizing and hurtful. So I would say when you're in that fragile state, that's not when I'm talking about taking more risk. You need to be a little more careful in those early days. Now, I mean, I'm like 8 years out, and I've had enough healing under my belt that I can take a little bit more risk with people. That doesn't mean that I still don't get my feelings hurt. I'll tell you what is also hurtful is when you've gone through something really tragic, and you get triggered, and say it's 10 years later and something really triggers you, and you tell someone about it and they say, oh, that was 10 years ago. That is absolutely what you should not say. True. To another person. And, and I used to beat myself up for that then I'd say, well, yeah, it was 10 years ago. Why are you still on that? And a therapist, and it's in my book, because that was such a big part of my healing, was thinking every time I got triggered, I wasn't doing it right. I didn't forgive enough or forgive right. And I'm still holding a grudge and I'm really back to square one, but that isn't true at all. It's just a trigger and it passes.
That's true.
And I had a wise therapist tell me, you can't, like, our brains trigger us. It's just a self-protection mechanism that it does. You can't control it. And it does not mean you're backsliding in your recovery. So I guess I'm amending my answer to say that you do have to use some discernment, and I guess there's a balance. You don't want to isolate and do life alone because you could get hurt.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too open and take too much risk because you will be hurt.
True.
And it's just finding that line and not being extreme one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be people out there that will absolutely never get it. And they will always say the worst things, even if they think they're saying the right things.
Yeah.
Like, I even had somebody tell me that, well, so maybe my abuser helped me in some ways. And I was like, no, if I benefited while he was manipulating me, then that was God's blessing, not his, so. Anyway.
That's true. Yeah.
Sorry.
You're right. I mean, that's very true. Like, some people, they are coming from they're having the best intentions in art, but it just comes out so totally wrong. It's totally the wrong thing. But you just feel with them like, yeah, okay, you have good intentions. I'll let it pass.
You just smile and you think, I will never talk to them. They are off my list. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I love the fact that earlier you're talking about forgiveness, like you learned to forgive again. And I was reading a devotion some weeks ago that talked about there's a difference between forgiving and forgetting. Like, you could forgive somebody, but 10 years down the line you could still remember. And you said earlier you get that trigger again. So how do you deal with when you get triggers, even 10 years, 8 years down the line?
Now I used to, want to reach out to someone and process it, like process the emotions I was feeling. But I got a lot of comments, like I mentioned, that hurt my feelings, or people that really wanted me to be over it by now, because any kind of tragic or, emotionally intense issue, most people don't know how to deal with it. And so they kind of want you to be moved on already.
Yeah.
They're willing to give you a few weeks or months, but then, and so, I mean, if it's really bad, I might make an appointment with my therapist, but I've learned now that when I realized that they didn't have any effect on my actual healing and my recovery journey, that they were just triggers, like random, they stopped affecting me as much. Because, and maybe I stopped giving them as much power over me, by realizing that it's just something natural that the brain does. And it's, so I don't know that I answered that very well. Just, I guess, to be patient with yourself and to go easy on yourself, and to know that the trigger is just a trigger. It has nothing to do with you backsliding. You're not, you're still right where you were, and it'll pass. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it's usually pass. Like, the process is slow and it's not linear, and then you just take it step by step and move forward.
Yeah, because early on, I had found this group of women that just offer support and advocacy for adult therapist and clergy abuse victims. And I would email them, because I'm very impatient, and I would email them and say, why am I not feeling better? It's been 6 months. And they would be like, yeah, it's been 6 months, and I'd say, well, it's been a year, and I still, and it just takes as long as it takes. And some people will move faster, some will move slower, but you can't really rush through your emotions. You have to give them that attention, and you won't heal if you skip over a step.
That's true.
So it's, even though it's frustrating, and I didn't want to be sad for 2 years or however long it was. I was angry that I was still sad that this person that hurt me was still hurting me. But you know what? It is what it is, and we should just, value our emotions when they come. Some can just come and go. Some we take to God. Some we may need to process with someone else. But it's just sort of a graph like this, healing.
That's true. Yeah. And will you say you're now able to forgive the abusers? Are you able to like let go of them? Whenever their thoughts come to your mind, you don't have that, hunger burning in you anymore.
Yeah. And for my abuser, I was able to forgive him, like I said, easier than I was able to forgive, say, my friend at church. And when any kind of anger or resentment or old memories come up surrounding her, I just say over and over, I forgive her, I forgive her, I forgive her. So it isn't a closed book kind of thing where I already forgave her last year or whatever. If it comes up, I just say, I forgive again.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I get flooded a lot with, I don't know if Satan is bombarding me or if it's just my mind is active, but sometimes I just say, Jesus, 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 because I'm like, no, I'm not entertaining these old, and it could be anything, any kind of old unhappy memory. I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. But you kind of have to stay at it because, our thoughts are always creeping in and Satan's also always trying to bring us down and just life in general. So,
yes.
the forgiveness is an ongoing thing that I do whenever it creeps back up.
Yes, yes. I'd love you to elaborate a little bit on God's part in your story. Like, how did he help you now to become, a successful author, a married mother of three, and even more things that you're doing right now? Like, how would you say God has been, holding your hands throughout this journey up to this moment that you are in your point of healing?
Yeah, even when I was in the abuse, well, I didn't know it was abuse, but towards the end, when I started thinking I'm in trouble, I knew God was calling out for me and trying to help me. He would show me the word adultery, but I was like, but I'm not committing adultery. I don't understand. But he was giving me warnings, of you're in danger. And he would send it through. I'd read it in the Bible or a book, or I'd see it, or a friend would say it. So he just kept at it, which is why I say, God wasn't turning his back on me during that time. And then I know it was him who gave me the strength to tell, because I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want anyone, my spouse, the community, I didn't want anyone to know. I just wanted to leave and pretend it didn't happen and never tell a soul. God gave me the strength to go to my pastor. And one of the last things I heard God say to me, because what I was wrestling with was guilt. Well, after all this man did, he was trying to help me and he was trying to love me for Jesus, but he just got tripped up and maybe that was my fault. And I feel so sorry for him. And he said it would kill him if I left. And will he kill himself if I leave or turn him in? Or he's this sad, broken person. And I heard God say, Amy, he is not your problem. And I was like, you're right. And it gave me the confidence to then go tell. And then I had a vacation that was pre-planned a week after I reported this to my pastor and his wife, a week after I was able to not go to therapy anymore. And God really showed up for me in really cool ways. And I won't spoil it, but he just loves on me. And a lot of it's through nature and shows up for me in the biggest ways and sends somebody, a stranger, into my life. And it's just nothing short of miraculous, but he does that for me because he knew the journey that I had, because my plan was to come home from that vacation and go on with my life. There would be no book. There would be no telling my husband. There would be no podcast. There would be no nothing, because I was embarrassed and ashamed and I didn't want anyone to know. And I certainly didn't want to lose my marriage and my family when I didn't even do anything, but no one's going to believe that, right? Because I'm an adult. So, and then as I'm leaving Canada and I feel like I'm leaving that experience with God behind, and I'm telling God, I can't do what I think you're asking me to do. I don't want to tell anyone. And, he showed me a heart like in the trees. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're coming with me. Like, I thought you just lived in Canada.
He's everywhere.
I'm like, you live in the US. And so then I came home and he just was showering me, like I said, in my way, with these little hearts and things, and just really holding me up, knowing you just have to take this step and you just have to get through this day. And he gave me the courage to, I would have shared with my husband anyway, because I'm an honest person, but he helped me with that. He gave me the strength to go to the medical board. And, he loved on me in ways like when I went to the medical board, I felt like they're just going to mock me and they don't really care and they're going to blow me off. But there was one of the investigators on the board was so kind and so loving, and he felt like a big brother. And I'd never even had a brother in my life before. And it was just like, I cannot believe this stranger cares about me so much that he is enraged and can't wait to confront the doctor. It felt like he was going to beat up the bully for me. And, those were just little ways that God kept loving on me, and, even in the medical board meeting that I was listening to the doctors discuss what they're going to do with the doctor's license, one of the doctors was outraged. I mean, outraged. And I thought, why do they even care? I mean, it's just me. And it was just God's way of, well, and I want to add this too. There were no other victims that came forward. And I'm like, where are all the other victims? Like, why do I have to be all by myself? Because I know that there's others. And I know now that God wanted me to be the only one, because he wanted me to know that me alone was worth fighting for. Yes. And that if I was the only victim, it kind of makes me cry thinking about it, that these strangers they're furious about what was done to you. They don't even know who you are, but they care that much. And it was so amazingly healing. And it was one of the ways I felt like God used other people to pour into me. Mm-hmm. And because after I had that experience, another victim came forward, and I feel like God let me be alone for that long so that I could really get it through my thick skull that he leaves the sheep to rescue the one. Mm. And he wanted me to see that I was that one, because I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that anybody, especially somebody that didn't know me, would care that much. Mm. And so anyway, and then, again, I found an attorney for my civil suit. I felt like God loved on me through him, because he was, again, like a father or a big brother. Like, I'm going to fight these people for you, because this is not okay how you were treated. And, he got paid only if I got paid. And so, I mean, I know there's part about the money, but he also cared. He was passionate about helping victims of this kind of abuse. So those are just kind of the ways that, and I even forget the question now, but it was how God, tell me what the question was.
Yeah, that's the way God took you through the whole journey to becoming who you are today.
Yeah, and just, so he just used the whole process to show me how he felt about me. And so,
yeah. What?
Oh, it was a journey.
Yes.
And the civil suit was 3 years, and it was brutal, but it was healing to stick up for myself for the first time ever.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I'm so glad that, God, saw you through this journey, and he's even seeing you through even right now, and helping you to become a much better person, a much more healed person. And I'm so grateful that you also obeyed, the calling of God, like to share this story with the world and to impact other people's life also out there. It's so awesome and beautiful.
I have to tell you a funny thing is, I wrote the book originally it wasn't a book. I just wrote my story out because I wanted to know what happened, because I couldn't forgive myself until I understood it, because that's just how my brain works. I was like, I need to understand exactly why you stayed before I can forgive you. So I wrote it out, and then it kind of became an idea of maybe I should write a book. And then I decided I am absolutely not writing a book. I mean, it's too hard. It's too embarrassing. People are going to make fun of me. There's going to be haters, which there have been, people that know the abuser and things.
Yes.
And I was at a different church. And afterwards, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, I know you don't know me, and this is kind of weird, but the Holy Spirit just wanted me to tell you that God sees what you're doing, and he wants you to know that he's going to give you what you need line by line. And I just got chills, and I said, oh my gosh, I just told God I'm not writing the book. and then I was like, it looks like we're writing a book.
Yeah.
And so, whenever I got discouraged about that, he gave me those kind of encouragements, or he'd send me a friend who was an editor that helped me in the early days. Just whenever I got stuck, he sent me a little burst of encouragement. Yeah. And, for years I said, okay, God, I'll write the book, but I don't know if I'm going to publish it, and so he gave me what I needed to get to each step. So
yeah, God's love is so real. Like he provides you with the right people at the right time, just to see you through. Yes. So I would love to ask, for people out there, or for someone out there who is going through this kind of situation right now and is about to give up on life because of these bad experiences and abuses, how would you advise such a person right now?
Yeah, and you just reminded me when this first happened and I got out, one of the things I did in those early days was I called a suicide hotline. I didn't know how I could survive it. The pain was too great. My husband was questioning me, and which was my biggest fear. And it felt like the world was judging me. And so I see no shame in that, in reaching out, because sometimes we're just in survival mode and we're just trying to keep our head above water.
True.
And sometimes, the healing doesn't come very quickly. And so we need that. So that support is crucial. And then the other thing I would say is telling can be very, whatever situation you're in, domestic violence, any kind of abuse, when you risk by telling because somebody can blow you off or minimize it, or, so I like to tell people to tell and keep telling. Or I've heard people say, tell until you're believed, tell until you're heard, because I wasn't able to escape on my own. I just wasn't. And I think a lot of us, especially adults, think I'm going to figure this out on my own because I'm not telling anybody. This is too embarrassing. Yeah. But I needed help. And the first person I told didn't believe me. And then I retreated and I stayed longer in the abusive situation. So keep telling and tell until, and just support. I have as much support that I've been able to find on my website. And then, and I know there's other things out there that I don't know about, or seek out a therapist, but somebody, you just got to have that, even one person, even, they even have hotlines now that you can just text, because sometimes people don't want to talk to a stranger when they're in that much pain. True. And I'm so thrilled to see that they even have that, but you just need somebody to give you that lifeline until, you can stay afloat. So I guess those are the things that I would say. And then you worry about the forgiveness, and then you can worry about, maybe finding a bigger group, but just you've got to have somebody.
Yes.
And don't be discouraged when the first one fails or the second one fails.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to add that your book is also a very wonderful, material to go through this process too. Like when everyone can pick up, preyed upon, and read through your story, one feels like, yes, I can relate to this story in one way or the other, and one feels like he or she is not alone, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the other thing I forgot that I did. I read every book I could find on Amazon that had to do with any kind of adult abuse. And I just hung on. I just felt those were like lifelines for me in those early days. Those weren't people I could call and talk to, but I read their book and I felt like, see, they get it. It's not just me. So thank you. And so that's what I want my book to be now, is a lifeline. And then also, to teach people that don't relate to this issue, so that they'll be more compassionate. The next time they hear a story or somebody comes to them, they can not get it and still say things that are supportive.
Yes, that's very important. That's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the best way to, connect and work with you? Like, I'm so blessed with everything you've, we've talked about today already, but I know there are a lot of questions that we could still talk about, and a lot of questions that the listeners out there might still want to ask or know about. So what's the best way to connect with you and work with you?
Yeah, my website, which I think you said you put in the notes, right?
Yes.
On my website, you can email me. I will respond to anybody who reaches out to me. You can buy my paperback there, or you can buy it on Amazon, the ebooks on Amazon.
Yes.
I have as many resources on there as I have been able to find. For therapist abuse, you'll find a group on there called TELL, TELL. And that was one of the groups that was kind of a lifeline for me in those early days. SNAP is geared, it's Survivors Network for those abused by priests, but they're branching out to include any kind of clergy or religious person. And they're even trying to widen their circle to, any kind of abuse, like coach or teacher or therapist. And they have virtual support groups that you can join. So anyway, it's just my website is the best way. And then,
awesome.
Reading the book, I hope, will make victims feel less alone, and people that are, have been hurt by God, that they can realize that you can still heal that relationship and be hurt by somebody in the church. You don't have to lose both.
Yes, yes. God is who he is. He's awesome. He's wonderful. And the church could hurt you in one way or the other, but doesn't change that. It doesn't change the fact that God is love and God, is always there to help you. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Amy, for everything you've taught me. And thank you so much for sharing your story with me. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.